When Mr. Shriver accepted our invitation to speak at this year's commencement, I was thrilled. It is extremely important to us at Loyola and to me personally to invite commencement speakers who truly understand the ideals at the heart of our Jesuit heritage, not just in an academic sense, but how principles like integrity, justice, service, and leadership will influence the course of one's life. Mr. Shriver already has an honorary degree from Loyola bestowed on him at the 1994 commencement. It is unusual for Loyola to invite a former honoree to be honored again. But over the past 20 years, Mark Shriver has made extraordinary contributions on behalf of children and families throughout the world, and he challenges each of us to recognize the need to be a man or woman for others all around the globe. Mark Shriver has made a lifelong commitment to advancing critical social justice initiatives focused on the needs of children, and we look forward to seeing all that he will continue to achieve in the years ahead. Mr. Shriver, you have done us a great honor by speaking at our commencement ceremony and by accepting the President's Medal, and we are delighted to have you with us today to offer our graduates insight into how they too can make their mark on the world. Please welcome Mark K. Shriver to offer the 2014 Loyola University Commencement Address.
You're good. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Schneider, for helping out up here and for your great job so far as MC. Father Lenane, thank you for that very kind introduction. To the members of the Board of Trustees, honored guests, faculty, staff, parents, families, and graduates, I really am so honored to be back at Loyola University to celebrate with the class of 2014. To the graduates, I want to extend my congratulations on a job incredibly well done. To your family and friends, I say thank you. Your unwavering love and support and sacrifice has made today possible. So graduates, I'm going to ask you to stand up, turn around, and join me in a big round of applause for your family and friends for their great support. I should probably just stop now, Father. Yeah, I'm okay. To Aaron Bowman, I want to extend my congratulations and gratitude for the great work that you and your colleagues are doing here in Baltimore City. To Mary Catherine Bunting, many thanks to you as well. The program that you're creating on peace and justice studies is not only necessary and needed, but it will make a profound difference here in Maryland and really across the world. I want to congratulate Mr. and Mrs. Hanway as well for the honorary degrees that you both have earned. You've truly deserved it. And like many of you here, I know the class of 2014, I can't wait to hear what Casey Seymour says during her student address. I had the pleasure of talking to her and meeting her earlier this morning with her family, and she's absolutely terrific. So Casey, congratulations. You know, when I received, Father, the phone call from Tim Brown, Father Brown, who I've known for over 20 years, I didn't think it was that big a deal. I was asked to call him back, and when I called him, I said, "Hey, Father, how are you?" And he said, "Great." "Mark, how are you?" I said, "Great." And he said, "Listen, on behalf of Father Lenane and the Board of Trustees, and most importantly, the class of 2014, would you come up to Baltimore and give the commencement address?" And I was floored, honestly. I was totally floored. And I said, "Of course, I'll do whatever." And I'm totally honored to come up to Baltimore. And when you're from a big Irish Catholic family like mine, first thing you do when you get an honor like this is you call up your siblings to rub it in, right? So I immediately hung up on Father Brown, and I called up my sister Maria. And I said, "Maria, you're not going to believe it. I've been asked to go to Loyola University. It's the best school in Maryland. It's fantastic." And Maria said, "Are you kidding me? Father Brown called me last week and asked me to give the commencement address." And I said, "What are you talking about?" She goes, "He called me up and told me I was wonderful And she goes, you know, you've written one best-selling book on Dad. I've written 5 or 6. You have 3 kids. I have 4. I'm on NBC News. You work for Save the Children. So I hung up on Maria. And then Father Brown, I don't know where you are. Then I called my brother Timothy up, who runs Special Olympics, okay, which my mother started. I said, Timmy, you're not going to believe it. I've been asked to go to Loyola University up in Baltimore. But Maria says that Father Brown called her first and asked him. I said, do you think Maria's lying? And he said, I don't know, but I got a message here to call Father Brown. So I'm happy to be the 3rd or 4th or 5th Shriver asked here today. It really is an honor, and thank you very much, Father. I am seriously incredibly excited to be here. I lived in Baltimore for 6 years. I started, as you heard just a couple minutes ago, the Choice Program for juvenile delinquents in the Cherry Hill neighborhood. I spent a lot of time on Loyola campus working with Father Selinger and Tom Shai. I was so honored to receive the honorary degree in 1994, not only with Maria and my brothers, but my mom and dad. You know, it's a little different vibe here, Father, than I actually got asked to go down to Houston a couple of months ago. Mrs. Bush, the first President Bush, Barbara Bush's wife, asked me to come down. It was 3,000 people in Houston. It was a fundraiser for family literacy, and it was 3 best-selling authors, John Meacham, who I know has been up to Loyola, Brad Thor, and a woman named Mary Nell, all #1 authors, and me. And I get down there, and I'm feeling pretty good about myself, and I get to the hotel, and I get in the elevator, and this guy looks at me with the boots on and the cowboy hat, and he goes, damn, has anybody ever told you you look like a Kennedy? And I said, well, yeah, once in a while. And he goes, that must make you so mad. So it's good to be in Maryland. It's good to be in Maryland. It is nice to be back here. So when that's a true story, by the way. Stuff I made up about Father Brown, but that's true. So when I asked my daughter Molly, our daughter Molly, who's 16 today, what I should say, she said, I want to go to Loyola. I hear there are a lot of cute boys there. Our son Tommy blurted out, hey, they have fantastic lacrosse teams and sexy women. Don't embarrass the family. And our 9-year-old Emma asked me if I wanted to go into a jungle gym. When I told my oldest and closest friend in the world that I was honored to be coming up here, he said, listen, you're nothing more than a 15-minute interruption in their celebration. Those greyhounds are ready to party. Cut it to 8 minutes and they'll love you. So with that in mind, I will try to keep it to 8 minutes, I promise. It really is an honor to be here this afternoon. When I looked at the list of folks that have given the graduation speech at this great university, I saw famous political leaders like Senator Mitchell and Mayor Giuliani, famous political commentators like Tim Russert and Leslie Stahl, best-selling authors like John Meacham and Ron Hansen, and business tycoons like Peter Lynch and Peter Angelos, and nonprofit leaders like Carolyn Wu. The governor of Maryland, my old roommate when I lived here in Baltimore, Martin O'Malley, has spoken here as well. And famous, wonderful Jesuits like Father Boyle and Father Byron and Father Ridley, and of course my favorite speaker ever, my mother, Eunice Kennedy Shriver. So I called Father Brown and I said, hey, Father, you know, this is a really big speech. Don't you think that a big shot Jesuit would be better suited to the graduates and for Loyola's reputation, someone like Pope Francis? And Father Brown replied, I read your book on your dad. You have plenty to say, you'll be fine. And then he hung up on me. So I've often thought over the last few months why I was asked to speak. I have not written, as Maria reminds me often, multiple bestsellers. I'm not a high-ranking politician or an expert political commentator, and I'm not a titan of industry. I'd like to think I was asked because of the good work I did in the Maryland legislature for 8 years, or maybe it was the work in the Choice Program, or maybe it was work in the business sector, or my work at Save the Children for the last 11 years working with poor kids and their families. But I know that I was asked because a lot of it to do about this book I wrote on my dad. And I wrote this book on my father because I realized as he died that I didn't have the joy in my life that he had. And I wanted to figure out how a man who could be happily married for 56 years to the woman of his dreams, who could raise 5 kids, all of whom love him, who could create out of nothing the Peace Corps, and President Johnson's war on poverty, programs like Head Start and Legal Services for the Poor, Job Corps, Vista, foster grandparents, community health centers, how he could do that and spread Special Olympics all around the world with my mom and still go to Mass every day of his life. And I mean every day of his life. I remember checking into hotels across Maryland and across the world, and the first question he asked was, where's the local Catholic church and what's the Mass schedule? And I was struck not by the newspaper articles that said he was a so-called great man for all these achievements, but by the comments of people like his favorite waitresses from his favorite restaurant who waited in line and said almost simultaneously, the two of them, your father was a good man. The guy at the U.S. Air counter at National Airport, Edwin DeBus, who waited in line and said some of the best moments of his life were taking my father through security even though he was struggling with Alzheimer's. The guy who picks up trash in our neighborhood, Mr. Dove, parked his truck a couple of days after Dad died and got out of it, walked up the driveway and wiped his hands on his jacket and said, your father was a good man. And he turned around, got back in the truck and drove away. So I dug into the letters and speeches that he had given, letters he used to write me almost every day in high school, and in college I'd get 2 or 3, and after graduating I got him 2 or 3 every day until Alzheimer's robbed him of the ability to write. And it was from those letters that I distilled, I think, the 3 principles that defined his life. It was his faith in God, and it was a faith that demanded acts of hope and love. So his faith you see in the letters, you see in the fact that his godfather was Cardinal Gibbons, the second cardinal here in America. My dad was born in 1915, and his father, who had taken Jeb Stuart to the Battle of Gettysburg, if you can believe that, went into the priesthood and dropped out twice because of health reasons, became great friends with Cardinal Gibbons, who would become, as I said, the cardinal here in Baltimore. And you see that faith when his family lost their money in the Depression, when his father started a bank in 1929 and lost what money they had, and my dad had to work himself through high school, through college, and through law school. And you see that faith when he joined the Navy after graduating from Yale Law School and survived battles in the Battle of Guadalcanal and Santa Cruz. You see that faith permeating everything he wrote. And that faith you see in real life, come to real life in acts of hope, whether it was the creation of the Peace Corps or Head Start or Legal Services, whether it was working with Democrats or Republicans. Governor Romney of Michigan was the honorary chair of Job Corps, Mrs. Reagan, the honorary chair of foster grandparents. First President Bush and second President Bush did so much on Special Olympics. My dad didn't care whether you're a Republican or Democrat, Christian or Jew, as long as you were adhering the gospel's call to feed the hungry, to clothe the naked, to shelter the homeless, to do what our Jewish friends call tikkun olam, to repair the world. And then the third principle at play, the third virtue, was love. I mentioned my dad's marriage to my mom of 56 years. I'll tell you one quick story, Father, and then I'll wrap it up. My brother Bobby got arrested for smoking pot when he was 16 years old. And I know I'm smiling. It's not because I love to tell the story, but it was on the front page of every newspaper in the country. It was 1970. My dad was thinking of running for governor of Maryland. My uncle Bobby had died a few months earlier. And when Bobby Shriver and Bobby Kennedy got arrested for smoking pot, it was all across the country. My father flew in, and my brother, who had long hair, had it all cut off immediately. My father arrived that afternoon, and my brother walked. He said it was a long walk down the hallway to his room. And he said, Dad said, look, sit on the bed. And my brother was terrified, a 16-year-old kid. And he said, look, you're a good kid. I love you. Take responsibility for this. But everything's going to be all right. You're a good kid. And that was it. And I've often thought that when I was in politics, if our daughter got arrested for smoking pot and I was thinking of running for governor, I think there'd be a lot more yelling in our house. And I think the point of this story is that here was a guy with a national reputation, an international reputation, who at a critical moment when he was thinking of running for the highest office in Maryland, thought it was more important to love his kid unconditionally, to support his kid in a crucial moment in that child's life. A couple of months before my dad died, I was driving him over to our house to eat dinner. And we were stopped at a light, and he had a moment of clarity. And I turned to him, and I don't know why I said it, but I said, Dad, you're losing your mind. How does it make you feel? And he turned and he said, I'm doing the best I can with what God has given me. And I think that is the virtue of faith. You see that faith in acts of hope and acts of love. So I'm sure all of you are wondering, what is the stories of faith, hope, and love about an old man, 95 years old, who died 3 years ago, have to do with all of us graduating here today? I really wrote this book for myself. I realized that after my dad had died that I needed to get more of that joy into my life. I get grouchy. I yell at our kids more often than I should. I lose my patience more often than I should. I don't write notes on a daily basis to our kids like my dad did. Perhaps some of you are just like me or know people just like me. And I realized that I needed to figure out how a guy could be so excited to meet the President of the United States or talk to the President of the United States. President Clinton and Vice President Biden eulogized Dad, but he was as excited to see them as he was those two waitresses at his favorite restaurant. He was excited to see a cardinal as he was a kid in the Cherry Hill neighborhood where I worked. I needed some of that mojo, some of that joy in my own life. And part of what I learned in the journey of writing this book is that to be full of joy doesn't mean that you're going to be happy all the time. When my dad received the phone call from Jackie Kennedy on Friday, November 22nd, asking him to organize the White House for President Kennedy's return from Dallas and to organize a funeral on Monday, this is Friday afternoon, to organize the funeral on Monday, I can't imagine that he was happy, especially with 3 kids under the age of 10 and a pregnant wife who was pregnant with me, and his wife was best friends with the assassinated president. He could not have been happy, but he organized a series of events that culminated in a funeral, all of which are still seared into our country's consciousness. Where did he find the energy to pull all that together while grieving? I think clearly it was his faith in God, a faith that knew that despite the horrible tragedy, President Kennedy was with God and his loved ones in heaven, and what ultimately is more joyful than that? And it was this joy-filled faith that provided the incredible energy to create out of absolutely nothing the Peace Corps, Head Start, Legal Services, and to spread Special Olympics with my mom all across the globe. You know, many universities and colleges don't talk about faith. They don't talk about God. They see their students' experience as a search for proof, the quest for truth. A number of years ago, the president of Harvard wrote that the special mission of the university is the discovery and transmission of knowledge, not to improve society in specific ways. Right there is the heart of why Loyola and each of you graduates is different. Loyola's motto sets the tone clearly. Strong truths, well lived, means that this university has taught each of you that you cannot be morally neutral, that there is no way that you can claim that the morally good life is not the ultimate purpose of the informed life. Over and over again, you're going to be faced with circumstances in which freedom and opportunity for others is being denied or compromised. Individualism and consumerism will invite you to look their way to focus exclusively on your needs and your desires. Will you accept that invitation, or will you accept the vision that Loyola has presented to you to be a contemplative in action, to have a deep personal relationship with God, to have faith, and to put that faith into action serving others? A few years ago, Pulitzer Prize-winning author Anna Quindlen encouraged the graduates of Villanova with these words. So here's what I want to tell you. Get a life, a real life, not a maniac pursuit of the next promotion, the bigger paycheck, the larger house. I think she's correct, but I propose that you can't really get a life if it's just you trying to do it on your own. You have to accept the invitation from God to make God the central part of your being. And if you do, you're going to find joy. No, you won't be happy every minute of every day, and such faith won't necessarily make you rich and famous, but it will bring you joy. Mother Teresa said it beautifully. Every act of love is a prayer. Prayer is action in love, and love in action is service. When Mother Teresa and her sisters fed the hungry, they were praying. When they took care of a leper, they were praying. Not with words, but with their hearts and their hands and their selflessness. Does such faith demand acts of hope and love like creating the Peace Corps and Head Start and Special Olympics, or being a saint like Mother Teresa? I hope not. I worked in the Cherry Hill neighborhood of Baltimore City for 6 years, working with juvenile delinquents, trying to help them get their lives back on track, get a decent education, maybe go to college, get a decent paying job. And my work today at Save the Children focuses on early childhood education for kids from birth to 5 years of age and abroad, trying to lower the numbers of babies who die on the day of their birth. 18,000 who die every day, over 1 million a year. These are acts of hope and love, are surely not on the same scale as what my parents did or what Mother Teresa did. But I think that's just fine. Each of us can commit acts of hope and love in other profoundly important ways, being kind to the waitress, being kind to the people who clean up your office, loving and forgiving one another unconditionally, saying, may I, thank you, and I'm sorry. These small acts are the foundation of our relationship with God. So if you really believe in God and that God is in everyone and in every interaction, that God is here right now, and that God does not play favorites, if you believe that each of your actions is a way to develop a closer relationship with God, that is really so exciting. No wonder my dad woke up every day fired up, pumped up for the day. That energy came from God and the sure knowledge that every person, every interaction in that day was a gift from God. I joked at the beginning that I was honored to be here, but I am, because by asking me to be here, a guy who's not a wealthy politician, not a politician or a wealthy businessman, not a multiple best-selling author, you're really honoring my father. You're honoring a man who lost both political races he entered, who fought a war against poverty, illiteracy, and misunderstanding, a battle that is still raging today. You're honoring a man who started the Peace Corps that's not serving as many people today as it was when he created it, a man who spread Special Olympics around the globe, but who knew that millions of people with developmental differences are locked up in institutions, forgotten and cast aside. You're honoring a guy who fought with Alzheimer's for 10 years and lost that battle. Indeed, by a lot of American definitions, my dad was not successful. But you're honoring him not because he was great or successful, but because he put his faith into action and tried to do good. He tried to feed the hungry, to clothe the naked, to shelter the homeless. He tried to tikkun olam, repair the world. He understood that the ultimate goal is not money and fame and fortune, not the things we so often associate with so-called greatness. No, being faithful and trying to do good, that's the ultimate goal. There's an old saying in my family made popular by President Kennedy. It's a passage from Luke. It says, "To whom much is given, much is required." It speaks of obligation. I much prefer St. Francis's invitation. It is in giving that we receive. Acts of love and acts of hope are giving gestures. They are, as Mother Teresa said, prayers in which we receive gifts of compassion, humility, resilience, joy that aren't available in any school book, even those here at Loyola. With all my heart, I hope you will accept Loyola's invitation to be a man and a woman for and with others in the Jesuit tradition throughout your lives. If you do, you're not going to have the biggest bank account, you're not going to have the biggest house, but you will be fulfilling the words of Pope Francis when he said just recently, "Sometimes we are tempted to find excuses and complain, acting as if we could only be happy if 1,000 conditions were met. To some extent, this is because our technological society has succeeded in multiplying occasions of pleasure. It has found it difficult to engender joy. I can say that the most beautiful and natural expressions of joy which I have seen in my life were in poor people who had little to hold on to. I also think of the real joy shown by others who, even amid pressing professional obligations, were able to preserve, in detachment and simplicity, a heart full of faith. In their own way, all these instances of joy flow from the infinite love of God, who has revealed himself to us in Jesus Christ. I never tire of repeating those words of Benedict XVI, which takes to the very heart of the gospel. Being a Christian is not the result of an ethical choice or a lofty idea, but the encounter with an event, a person, which gives life a new horizon and a decisive direction. Good luck in your pursuit of such a joy-filled faith. Thank you very much.